So we now come to our first case study. Let's please welcome Michael Almeida, who's the Regional Sales Manager for 2N Canada.
I want to thank you all for joining me here today. It's very exciting to be part of the panel here. This is the first time I'm getting to do one of these events, so it's pretty exciting. I've done a bunch of webinars in the last year and a bit, but it's nice to be a part of this group with you guys. So I am the Regional Sales Manager for 2N and Access Communication in the Intercom portfolio for Canada. So I've got a couple of things I'm going to share with you guys today, but before I get started, just on a housekeeping note, I want to let you guys all know that we are having our Ontario Healthcare Community Networking event at our Access Experience Center in Mississauga, and the date for that is on December 15th. Time is on above on the slide there. And of course, if you would like to RSVP for this event, you can reach out to my colleague, Amanda Van Afro, and her email is listed down there at the bottom as well. So we welcome all the end users into this event and welcome you into our space so we can have a nice little networking get together. So intercoms, wow, pretty interesting over the last year and a half. Definitely the market and the world has changed. We saw a ton of opportunities come up and arise in different types of use cases, either urgent care, clinical care, pharmaceutical, hospital, and who would have ever thought about the need for the flexibility and the ability of having to control these doors. But they all came along with some particular challenges on their own. Different networks, different systems need to be integrated into them. And these were all challenges on their own. And then, of course, the way to communicate in with patients and stuff. So creating less touch environments, better ways to communicate, three-way calling, anterooms, that kind of list goes on and on. So it was challenging, but we definitely came up with some neat solutions at Access and some better ways to kind of help this space out. And we'd have some great examples of that and opportunities to work in those spaces and make them a little cleaner and safer. One of the biggest things that really prompted this change was, of course, the need for convergence in the technology, taking into consideration access control, intercoms at door points, at garage entrances, ways that the calls are being answered through answering units. And then, of course, now taking into consideration possibly vertical access control, controlling visitor traffic through specific floors, denying access to certain floors where before it used to just be open traffic. So all of these technologies needed to converge. And a lot of times what was happening is these systems were all separate subsystems. We typically see a video management system on its own, and then we see an access control system on its own. And then intercoms have always been traditionally in the analog world completely standalone. And every time anybody thought about an intercom, they associated to the door. Well, we learned very quickly that's not the case. We're talking between departments, inside offices, again, as I mentioned, inside patient rooms, but also addressing that into public addressing, virtual answering. We were at a period where a lot of buildings were closed down. How do we handle that type of traffic? So being able to take these old analog devices and update them with some new IP technology that integrated and converted a lot of this technology together was a real key successor for us. And of course, nobody carries the same platform and everybody wants to talk their own language. And with our 2N and Access portfolio, we were able to integrate, and this was probably one of our successes in some of these opportunities, was taking in a lot of legacy languages like WEGAN, which you'd have in a traditional access control system or garage operation system, pulling the camera streams from those intercoms and pushing them back into the DMS. So if there was an incident or event, it was able to go back and record and timestamp that and see what actually occurred. But also have that ability of routing that call through an automation system or through a legacy telephony system. So having the ability and certified partnerships with companies like Cisco and Avaya, this was key because now that intercom is a true IP communicator. And that really played a huge role when we looked at areas where there was nurses and patients and doctors that had to interact. Doctors sometimes were completely off-site, nurses were in one area, patients were in another. So being able to do that through network traffic really made this communication method a lot easier. And again, providing a flexible way of answering. As we saw with buildings closed down or protocols in place, Face-to-face interaction, of course, was limited. We're doing this over a webinar right now. But again, having that ability of taking calls, roll them over, or if it was something where there was a security officer or guard and he was on a tour, he could get a call on a mobile phone. So these were all flexible ways of taking the communication methods and really started to translate them into use cases. So that brings me to one of our cases that we worked on here in Canada. And again, it was pretty common throughout all the Americas. But what typically happened was we had isolation rooms where there were patients. And traditionally, our intercoms are designed to mount on doors or at the front of a building. But we very quickly at Access made some adapter brackets where these were able to mount onto medical carts or inside patient suite rooms. And then just through some simple IP routing connecting to a network, we were able to take those calls from the patients and route them directly to a nurse station without them having to get called into the room, able to have an open conversation with the patient where needed. But again, being over IP, if somebody was busy, that call was able to be translated over. It wasn't just ringing on a dormant station where nobody was at. So the interaction, the response time, everything was increased, as well as keeping everyone safe in the process of doing that. Another method that we saw out there was controlling doors and access. Again, this was a big factor. Doing it all over IP really changed the way the buildings were secured. Traditionally, legacy access control was, and this ties into patient monitoring, again, long-term care facilities. We're looking for two-factor authentication, but a lot of old systems require a lot of cabling. So being able to really adapt for any new construction builds or updating, doing over IP really gave a lot of facilities the ability of scalability, being able to expand and grow, being able to be future ready, which was one of the key things. And again, tying back in to legacy systems as well was one of the key factors. And that goes back to one of the earlier slides where I was talking about some of the legacy communication protocols that we have in place. So this really gave a better, safer way to interact and communicate, as well as controlling this access to the doors. One of the other things we added into our access portfolio was some Bluetooth technology. Again, one of the weakest points of a door entry is the cost associated with cards and fobs. Now being able to issue Bluetooth credentials for visitors or people coming in the office, using their mobile device for a less touch access control method was a key deciding factor for some facilities, as well as tying in some other options such as two-factor authentication or dual factor for patient monitoring to trigger any sort of emergency notification system and stuff like that as well. So a lot of these cases were obviously amplified, but we did see that increase in activity, and we were happy to be part of a lot of these opportunities to help start securing more doors. But again, taking those isolated intercom opportunities and creating them as a fully networked IP communication system or IP communication protocol or method for any sort of facility. And that really started tying into all the different types of opportunities out there. Hopefully that was informative. I want to thank you guys for taking the time, and I will pass it back over to Neil.
Great. Thanks very much, Michael, for that presentation.